All right, we are pleased to be joined right now by award-winning writer, published author, my good friend and friend of the podcast, Tyler Dunne of GoLongTD.com. Tyler has recently published his first book, The Blood and Guts, How Tight Ends Save Football. We've got a lot to talk about with that. But TD, how you doing?
I am doing fantastic, Dan. My God, it's good to see you. It's good to hear you. I wish you had one of these in your hands and we were in person, drinking a couple cold ones together because it's been way too long.
Yeah, typically our drink a couple of cold ones occurs in Indianapolis at the Combine. That's about the only time we see each other in person these days. And so hopefully that'll be on the docket for February 2023, which will be right around the corner. But yeah, we are in the thick of football season, and you're in the thick of a publicity tour for this terrific book that you've written. And I guess starting out, tell me a little bit about how this whole thing came together and what the project, The Blood and Guts, How Tight Ends Save Football, was designed to do, with a very, very micro-focused look on one position that has become a big deal in this league that we cover.
No doubt. I try to look at the tight end position as like a window into something much, much bigger. So like how this whole thing started, I'm sure you get this question all the time, Dan, because you are just an unbelievable, exceptional writer, thinker. People are probably asking you all the time, like, when are you going to write a book? What are you going to write about? You've written books, obviously, but like, what's the next book going to be? And like again and again and again, I kept hearing it, and nothing was really inspiring me. Like, is it Green Bay related, Buffalo related? Whatever you're going to do a book on, like, you better be obsessed with it and passionate about it, because it is so true. It is at the forefront of your brain every second of every day, it feels like. So you better be all in. And all I really knew was I love football. I played it, throughout my childhood, into high school, a year of college, covered it as long as I can remember. Just I was trying to think of the best way to tell the story of the sport. I guess that's the vague way of saying how it started. And then the more I kind of wrap my brain around it, it's like, okay, it's not necessarily one specific team, one specific player. I didn't want to go narrow that direction. But the tight end position, you have to do everything. You have to be in line, in the trenches, just sweating, bleeding, bruising up people, doing all that grunt work. Yet you're also detached from the line of scrimmage. It's 3rd and 8, and there's 80,000 fans screaming, and there's millions of people watching at home, and you have to make a play in front of America, right? So there's the glitz, there's the glam, there's the glory, there's the pressure to make that play. There's intelligence next to the quarterback. Nobody really has to know more about the offense than the tight end. I mean, you're responsible for so much. You're in pass protection, run blocking, you're running routes, so you have to know all the pass concepts, and really that mental pressure that comes with the position. And it really is so true that you have to mentally, like, I feel like all the tight ends I talked to for this book, at some point, like, they faced that fork in the road. Like, they could have gone one direction or the other. And the fact that they went a very specific direction, Dallas Clark, his mother dying in his arms and as a high school senior, Jimmy Graham's in a group home, fearing for his life, fighting for his life, having to become a quote unquote savage to survive in a group of savages. Like, he's an orphan. Nobody wants him in his life. All 15 of these guys, at some point, they faced that moment, and they plowed through it. They went the right direction. I feel like there's a mental pressure that comes with the tight end position that it's rooted in something really, really deep in their individual lives. So I just started traveling the country, hanging out with Ditka and Gronk and Jackie Smith and Tony Gonzalez and Ben Coates. And it kind of became something like much, much bigger the more I talked to these guys, where I get it. You're going to see a book and it's like, okay, tight ends. What do I really want to know about tight ends and the X's and O's? Like, there's X's and O's in the book. Don't get me wrong. If that's your thing, we've got you covered. But it's more about life. It's more about all of us staring into the mirror and like examining our own lives. It became bigger than I ever could have anticipated.
And it's really cool. Just a little background for our audience. You and I first got to know each other. Was it 2010? You tell me the year.
Yeah, 2010.
2010. We were coworkers at the Fayetteville Observer in North Carolina. I was already working at the Fayetteville Observer, and we had an opening at the time for a preps writer and a feature writer. And my boss at the time, eventually became your boss, Todd Adams, sent me home with a packet of of 3 people's work, right? And I got home and the Tyler Dunne packet jumped off the page, right? And it was like, dude, like we got to hire this guy. Terrific young vision, terrific writer, terrific reporting chops. It was all evident from the get-go. I bring that up because as I read this book, I'm very proud of what you've become and how good of a writer you are. But number 2, inside this book, there is the passion and investment that you bring to your job that is evident on a daily basis. And it's really cool to see you take on this project and take people places that, as you just described, you might not expect when you're picking up a book on tight ends. And I'll start here because the book starts here at the old Florida Golf Club in Naples, Florida. Mike Ditka with a cigar in his hand. And for our audience, obviously the Take the North podcast audience, a rabid, loyal Bears fan audience, this is going to be relevant, right? You start the book with Mike Ditka smoking a cigar and talking about his career journey as a tight end. Take me into that golf club and what you saw just sitting down with that coach for the first time in the first chapter.
Yeah, so we talked on the phone for a few times actually, and at first I'm thinking that's probably going to be as close as I'm going to get to Mike Ditka is just chatting with him over the phone, and each time he kind of had to jog the memory. Oh, who is this kid from Buffalo, New York, who keeps bothering me about these damn tight ends, But here's what's crazy. Mike Ditka texts. He does text.
Yeah.
It's the messages are short, it might just be a word or two, but he did text back. And I think eventually I just bothered him so much with calls, with texts. It was like he started to kind of put the pieces together and realize what I was working on. And so when I pitched to him, let's just get together right down there in Florida, right where you are every day. He was all about it. What's crazy? The morning that I went to see him, I almost missed my flight. So,
go ahead.
Our kids were so nuts. We're so nuts the night before that I didn't even set my alarm. I just like passed my mind. I don't know why. So, got to the airport, sprinted, made the flight, got down there, hung out with the coach, and it was awesome. I mean, we were right where he is every day, and in that back room where he hangs out with his buddies and he plays cards and he's got his cigar and he's just, he can't move like he once moved. He's in a walker. He kind of scoots around, but his mind was way sharper than I expected as people will read it in the book. Like, I had read his autobiography and did my research so I could kind of bring up certain moments and certain games that kind of defined him as a player and as a coach later in life. But once you kind of brought something up, Mike remembered it like it was yesterday.
And look, like I think he just celebrated his 83rd birthday recently here this fall, and so obviously he's a ways removed from his days as a player, a ways removed from his days as the coach of the Chicago Bears, which ended 30 years ago, right? It's insane to think about that at this point. But the reason you start the book where you started is because Mike Ditka was sort of the start of the tight end evolution and the start of the tight end revolution. Tell people a little bit about what you learned about Luke Johnsos, about Mike Ditka, about how today's tight end has Mike Ditka's fingerprints all over it.
Right. So, I mean, I guess my Mike Ditka expertise was pretty surface level, right? Kind of saw him in Kicking and Screaming and see him on ESPN Sunday Countdown and know about the 85 Bears vaguely, but I didn't know anything about him as a tight end. Like, barely knew that he played for the Dallas Cowboys and, had a stop at Philly in between. But, man, to go down there and hang out with Mike Ditka and kind of start from the start in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. So there's, a whole upbringing story there on where he comes from and his dad being an old school dad, pulling out the belt, being abusive. And if you were to take the stories from his childhood and kind of parachute them into life today, you'd say, holy crap, that is awful. And nobody should be raised like Mike Ditka was raised. He looks back at it fondly and says, I am grateful for my father and how he raised me. And the beatings I took were deserved in his mind. He did burn the woods down, he said. When he,
with a cigarette, right?
Yeah, he smoked one of his dad's cigs for the first time. Threw it down and burned the woods down, and his dad let him feel it. But yeah, he gets to the University of Pitt, and then to the Chicago Bears. He was never really used as a receiver through high school much, through college much. I mean, no ends were. There were split ends
Right.
and ends. And a split end was the Don Hutson and the Raymond Berry. And, they were the receiving threat. And the end was just an extended tackle who maybe they ran 5 yards, caught a ball, and fell down. But that was about it. So he gets to Chicago, and I'd love to know if your listeners even have ever heard of Luke Johnsos. Have you, Dan? Have you ever heard of Luke Johnsos?
I have heard of him, but only because I'm a guy who has media guides, right? And thumbs through, and you see various names in media guides. And certainly when we were in the 100-year celebration a couple of years ago, there was a lot of history that was revived. But I'm betting that most of this audience, particularly a younger audience that we have, has no idea what we're talking about.
Right. I mean, he said Luke Johnsos, and I'm Googling, was it Johnson? What exactly is that? It is exactly how it sounds. And he was the offensive coordinator under George Halas.
Yeah.
And he was the one that Ditka really credits for having the vision to say, okay, Mike, just move about 2-3 yards outside of the tackle. That way you can have a two-way release. You can go left, you can go right. And it kind of just stretched the game out a little bit. And just enough for Mike Ditka to be able to run a route. And I think Mike doesn't give himself enough credit. I mean, he's trying to give everybody else credit. His quarterback, his head coach, his offensive coordinator. Tom Landry just played an unbelievable role later in life, obviously. Because once he caught a ball, all hell broke loose. I mean, he just became that top of the food chain, just ass kicker looking to get revenge on anybody who did him or his teammates wrong. And just the highlights speak for themselves. I mean, that play against the Pittsburgh Steelers shortly after JFK was assassinated just defines his career. It looks like a bunch of shoemakers and milk delivery men trying to dive on him, just these helpless DBs that have no shot at tackling Mike Ditka. But that's what he did. I think that's really what defined the tight end position more than anything, is what he was able to do when he had the ball in his hands. But it did take a handful of innovators to create the tight end position and then keep it innovating, keep it evolving. It wasn't like the whole NFL realized the tight end can be special. Let's make this an athletic freak, this specimen that's going to get these create all these matchup problems for defenses. It was Don Coryell and Sam Bertigliano and Bill Parcells and Bill Belichick and Sean Payton. And there were dozens upon dozens of more coaches who did not want to evolve and did not want to change. And the tight end just kind of kept evolving over time.
The last thing on the Ditka topic, because we got a couple other guys I want to ask you about, but the time in Philly, right? In reading your book, it left an impact on me more so than probably I ever realized in terms of a trying point of his life, certainly a trying point in his football career. I'm wondering if you can just sort of briefly summarize and encapsulate that period of Mike Ditka's life and the bridge he had to cross to then, obviously, as you mentioned, unite with Tom Landry and then get himself basically on a rocket to superstardom from there.
So he's, having this incredible career with the Chicago Bears, but things go south with George Halas. The relationship gets colder, isn't as good. I think he's kind of flirting with the AFL at the time. And so George Halas ships him off to the Philadelphia Eagles. Ditka had a few injuries too. I mean, he busted up his shoulder and he played a season with one arm. He's catching a ton of passes with one arm, kind of corralling the ball in. But when he got to Philadelphia, the first year was okay. That second year, though, I think they won 2 games. He's going at it with the head coach. He's depressed. He's just going out downtown Philly, drinking all the time. He kind of admitted he'd wake up in the morning and not really know how he got back home. He's in this haze of not knowing what's real, what's not real. He even said the complexion of his skin would change. He just drank so much and just let his career, let his life slip away to the point where a late game with the Philadelphia Eagles, he specifically told his parents, don't go to the game. They're at the game, and he can remember being on the sideline, just down and out, depressed, crying, just finished with football. So when that season was over, he drove home. He was done. He was ready to quit the sport. Who knows where his life even goes? We definitely never even know who Mike Ditka really is beyond a good, great career with the Bears, but he's never like this Hall of Fame coach and broadcaster and larger than life figure. It took a phone call from Tom Landry out of nowhere. Tom Landry, the Dallas Cowboys head coach, who was winning a lot of games but just couldn't get over the hump, reached out to Mike Ditka. Ditka thinks it was because he had a good game against the Cowboys, right? In this terrible season, he had a decent game against a rival, and that Landry thought, okay, this is a player at the end of his career that can provide some leadership in our locker room, can be a good blocker, and is going to be able to give us a little something extra to get over the hump. So Mike takes him up on it, and he goes to Dallas, and his life changes, right?
Yeah.
Like we don't talk about his Dallas Cowboys career like nearly enough because like the numbers on Pro Football Reference aren't as good as they were in Chicago. His career, I mean, what he did in Dallas helped define the tight end position as much as anything, because he faced the man in the mirror and he decided to get his shit together and get his life together and go somewhere and make something of himself, which comes up again and again and again in the book, where so many of these tight ends just they could have just disappeared into oblivion, never to be heard from again. But for Mike Ditka to go to Dallas and become the leader on that team, Roger Staubach said himself, like, Ditka was the one who spoke up, got us on the right track after a rough start. They get to the Super Bowl. He catches a touchdown in that Super Bowl, and they beat Miami.
It's an incredible chapter, and it's an incredible opening to the book to get really rolling. And you go through, as you mentioned earlier, a whole world tour of talking to tight ends everywhere from different generations and different parts of the country and all these other things. Before I get into the fun stories, because everyone loves a good Gronk story, you mentioned Jimmy Graham earlier, and we all know Jimmy Graham the Saint. We all know Jimmy Graham the Seahawk and the Packer. And Jimmy Graham had a 2-year stop here in Chicago at the end of his career. He actually became a guy that I really enjoyed talking to, because he has a level of introspection and engagement that when you got him on the right day for the right amount of time, you're like, man, this is a really fun guy to talk to. So just briefly share your sort of impressions of Jimmy and kind of the incredible nature of his career. I'll tell you this, back around the time that we were getting to know each other in North Carolina, Jimmy was coming off a basketball career in the ACC. I was covering him as a Miami Hurricane power forward at places like the Smith Center and Cameron Indoor Stadium. And then to see what he became as an NFL tight end, truly remarkable. Just share some insight into what you took from Jimmy's story.
I mean, his life and his upbringing is remarkable in itself, where nobody even wants him. His mom doesn't want him. All the men in his life don't want him. The name of the chapter is Know Your Worth. And basically, nobody who should have loved him and cared for him at a young age really did. So he ends up at this group home, Kennedy home, with a lot of at-risk teens that are 2, 3, 4 years older than him that are there because they got into trouble. Right, they needed to be rehabilitated. Jimmy didn't get in trouble. He didn't need to be rehabilitated. Nobody wanted him, so he's there and just getting pummeled every day. I mean, he creates this scene. He's in the back of a van, and they literally just ganged up on him and broke his face. I mean, he was fearing for his life. He had to basically fight for himself with a broomstick every day for survival. So people thinking that he's this soft basketball player later in his when he gets to the NFL, it was so untrue. I mean, this was a tough SOB who there were stories. He even said, we've got a lot of stories in the book, but Jimmy said, look, there's stuff I don't even want to get into because it's too traumatic. He doesn't even want to bring it up because I think it was way worse than we can ever wrap our brains around. But yeah, like he was great. I mean, he was introspective. He was open. He was engaging. I didn't know what to expect. I had never talked to Jimmy Graham before in my life. I'd heard like later in his career, he got a little surly and, wasn't, maybe not a fan of like the big, as we call in the biz, the gangbang interview where there's a big group of people all gathering around. But he was unbelievable. It's so insightful. And I think that what was really interesting with Jimmy Graham is, so you mentioned, his University of Miami basketball career where he's blocking a lot of shots and dunking, and he's a rim runner. So he had a decision to make after his basketball career was over, and he had a ton of options. He could have gone overseas, and one team in one country, he said, offered him $500,000, kind of enticing, see the world. Had 9 NBA tryout options. he could have, tried to become that 10th, 11th, 12th man, work his way up. There's a lot of money in the NBA. He could have found a role there. And then he could have been a Navy SEAL. Like, he just loved the Navy SEALs and the idea of fighting for your country. He was unbelievably bright.
Yeah.
His grades were exceptional. And then he got a call from the New England Patriots. So Bill Belichick comes up again and again in this book. He knew what the tight end position could be before anybody else, era to era to era. And this is before Jimmy Graham played a down of football with the Hurricanes.
Yeah.
So his basketball career is over. He's trying to figure everything out. And Matt Patricia puts him through a football workout in Florida, and they basically offer him a spot on the practice squad. Like, hey, come hang out on the practice squad. Tom Brady's the quarterback. Bill Belichick's the head coach. Like, why would you turn that down? A chance to learn from, like, the best of the best and everything. And it hit him when he was at a barbecue, like, throwing the football around with Bernie Kosar, of all people. Bernie Kosar's on campus and kind of tells him, like, hey, you should give this tight end thing a shot here in Miami. You could have a football career. Look at all the tight ends that have come through here. And, the football coaches, a couple football coaches on staff had been trying to convince him to come over to their sport while he was playing basketball. So the bug was kind of planted, and he decided, all right, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. I'm going to play a year of college football right here at the U, where they've had so many great tight ends. And he did. I think he caught like 17, 18 balls, but a handful of touchdowns in the red zone. He learned the position, and then by the time the 2010 draft rolled around, everybody kind of knew that this guy was
potential.
What the position was becoming. By then, Tony Gonzalez, Antonio Gates, all these guys were evolving the position. And, Belichick was he got Gronkowski in the second round of that draft. Then he got Aaron Hernandez in the fourth. And Sean Payton knew. Sean Payton, I mean, it's the backstory in that draft's unbelievable because, Jimmy Graham was convinced the Baltimore Ravens were going to draft him. They put him through a workout. It was like a brutal workout. They gave him the playbook. Like, they made it seem like, we're taking you. Like, it's just going to happen. But Bill Parcells was running the Miami Dolphins. They wanted Jimmy Graham. They were the coaches at the Senior Bowl that year. And, like, they made his life like a living hell just to try to make him look bad so the other teams wouldn't draft him. and so then Bill Belichick still wants him, like, a year later, obviously. And Sean Payton is really close with Bill Parcells. Like, he looks at Bill Parcells as like a father. So they're kind of talking about football and guys they like off the record. And, Peyton is doing his work. And guess who the area scout is for the Saints, like scouting Jimmy Graham? Jim Monos, my podcast co-host. So Monos is like, he's studied. So he's in the book. He's like seeing what Jimmy Graham could be as a tight end. And Peyton had the balls to take Jimmy Graham a round earlier than kind of everybody else. Everybody else kind of viewed him as like a fourth rounder. The Ravens probably would have taken him in the fourth. The Patriots probably would have taken him in the fourth, and Peyton took him in the third. The Dolphins would have taken him in the fourth, and the Saints took him in the third round.
Gave him to Drew Brees, right? And how about that for a career breakthrough? So good for Jimmy there. The book is The Blood and Guts: How Tight Ends Save Football. And the time we have left, I want to take our audience and your prospective readers into chapter 14, Yo Soy Fiesta. It is the chapter on Rob Gronkowski. Anybody who loves Gronk is going to love reading this chapter because it is a very thorough history of who Rob Gronkowski is, who Rob Gronkowski became, why Rob Gronkowski became who he became. And so I'm going to ask you a few questions here. The first one being, describe to me the significance of the trophy case in the family home of the Gronkowskis in New York.
Oh, man. So, father of the Gronks.
Gordy Gronk.
Gronkowski. We got together at G&G Fitness. He's a fitness guru here in Western New York. He wanted all of the brothers to just see who was getting the most trophies. So it became a rat race for whoever could collect the most hardware. Each of the Gronks, if my math is correct, there's 5 Gronks. And one of them, Gordy Jr. was into baseball, but they all were unbelievable athletes, and it didn't take too long for Rob to get the most hardware. But it was just all out craziness inside of that household in Amherst, New York, where I think we start the chapter with Chris Gronkowski. He's going at it with Rob. They were getting into it with mini sticks, I believe. And so for those who don't, I don't know if it's a Western New York thing.
Little hockey sticks.
Me and my
right?
brother played it. Yeah, like little hockey sticks, little nets in your basement, and you do slap shots. You beat the hell out of each other. It's a lot of fun. I actually caught a ball from my brother in the eye once, and I couldn't see for half of a day. So it can get rough down there. But Chris, to get Rob back, he just the move for the Gronkowskis was after you kind of tick somebody off, you retreat to the bathroom. You run to the bathroom and you close the door, you lock it, you stay there until things calm down. So Rob was blasting away on Chris and then runs to the bathroom, and Chris got there just in time to hip check Rob into the door, and the momentum took him into the bathtub. He hit his head and he was unconscious. And Rob was just out cold. He's done. So Chris at first is kind of like laughing, and then he walks back to the bedroom. Yeah, he thinks, is Rob dead? Is Rob done? Did we lose my brother? Is he? So he's gonna call the cops and get help. And next thing you know, Rob just comes storming out of nowhere and gets his revenge, and they go at it again. So yeah, the stories growing up in the house of Gronk were wild. And I mean, you know what's crazy though, Dan, is as much as we saw Rob Gronkowski like inflict pain on other people, like he like broke Kyle Van Bosch's like neck just on a crackback block his rookie year, to kicking Sergio Brown out of the club. Like their rivalry is hilarious. I mean, he did so much, but I think what he takes the most pride in and the most joy in, not just pride, I think he enjoys it, is getting hit. He likes being a glutton of punishment because he's that's been the case his entire life. He's always antagonizing his brothers and getting hit, and he loves getting back up, and he always gets back up.
I think one of the things that Gronk takes the most pride in is being Gronk. And that's what really comes through in the chapter, because this is a guy who partied hard and worked hard. And a couple Chicago connections that I drew in this chapter is the guy that Rob Gronkowski reminds me of reading this is Steve McMichael, Mongo, right? The larger-than-life character of the 85 Chicago Bears, maybe the most colorful personality on a truly colorful team. And the reason that they remind me so much of one another is because these guys were wild men. These guys loved to be the center of attention. These guys loved to be the source of entertainment. These guys loved to party. But in order to be that guy, both of these guys, Tyler, and you wrote about this extensively in this chapter, understood that they had to bust their ass in their profession and work on their craft and make sure that they earned the right to party, right? It's a strange thing to say, but both of these guys, all these years later, have the respect of the guys that were around them, and nobody says, oh, that guy was an idiot. That guy, he was just out there for himself. It's like we let Gronk be Gronk. We let Mongo be Mongo because we knew who he was as the heartbeat of the locker room and how damn hard they worked. And obviously you got into that a little bit.
You just nailed it 100%, because when Rob Gronkowski was just, a little kid, barely a teenager, the tight end, I mean, usually the tight end position, it chooses you. Like you have a certain set of characteristics so there's this gravitational pull where you eventually become a tight end, because nobody dreams of becoming a tight end. It just kind of happens. Except for Rob Gronkowski. He idolized Jeremy Shockey. He wanted to be Jeremy Shockey. He saw this dude with the blonde hair that was brash and saying whatever the hell he wanted in New York City, getting all the chicks, living the high life, going out there on Sunday, kicking everybody's ass like that. Rob Gronkowski wanted to be Jeremy Shockey, and he wrote him a letter actually as a kid, sent it right to the Giants facility, and just told Jeremy Shockey how much he looked up to him. And that, to your point, the similarities between Shockey and Gronk are pretty uncanny. So Jeremy Shockey, same way. Yes, he partied hard. He got a lot of girls. He lived it up. He packed a lot into his decade in the NFL. But if Jeremy Shockey went out one night and if he had a few drinks, he kind of felt guilty. He felt bad inside, and he would just wake up and just bang out 50 to 100 push-ups, sit-ups out of nowhere. Same thing with Rob Gronkowski. If he was hungover with his brothers, they'd pop in P90X Insanity DVD and get a workout and work it off. It's
just like you and I did, right? When we were hungover back in the day. Exactly what we would do. P90X.
We're at the JW, working on that trend.
Well, so listen, like you bring up Indianapolis there. Victory Field is the site of the post Super Bowl party after the Giants take down the Patriots for the second time in a Super Bowl, and it's a devastating loss for the Patriots. They lose with their final Hail Mary being just outside the reach of Rob Gronkowski's hands, and there he is just a few hours later partying his butt off, which rubbed some people the wrong way, including some former Patriots, some of the old school former Patriots. What I thought was notable in the chapter was you wrote about how a guy like Rodney Harrison was very condemning with his words and saying it would have never happened in our era. And what I like the most about Rob Gronkowski is throughout his career, he was just like, this is who I am, right? Like, you're going to get the results out of me. Live with who I am, and this is who I am. And ultimately, over time, the guys that played with him love the dude because he's a giant teddy bear and he's a damn hard worker. And most importantly, he gets those results on game day.
Yeah, he epitomizes the position, the sport, in countless ways, and he saved the sport in countless ways when the overcorrection is really kicking in, and there's flags and there's fines, and guys don't even really know what football is anymore. Here comes Rob Gronkowski, reminding everybody that we love violence and that physicality matters. But equally important is the fact that, right then in the early 2010s, Bill Belichick is starting to become the greatest coach of all time. It's entering our brains. We all kind of look at him as that. And his assistants go elsewhere and lose. Yet, for whatever reason, subconsciously or consciously, we all think, to win in the NFL, you kind of have to be a mean old cuss. You need to have, players who are basically robots who just get in line and are militaristic and do what they're told. And that's the formula that if you're honest, if you say what you feel and it gets in the media, like that equates to losses, which is just ridiculous. We're not that important in the media. We really aren't. So I think Rob Gronkowski's significance to the sport is that as well. Like that summer, that off season, right when that was the number one story out of that game is Rob Gronkowski after a Super Bowl loss when he should be drowning in his tears is popping his shirt off and dancing with his brothers on one good leg, right?
Right.
Like he barely was able to play in that game, and you're right, was inches short of catching that Hail Mary. For him to then party like crazy and face the backlash, not just from people in the media, but like several former Patriots came out and were unhappy with how he conducted himself. The Patriots weren't happy, but for his reaction to be, I am not going to change. I am going to be myself. This is the life I've always wanted. He always wanted to live like a rock star. Thinking back to watching Jeremy Shockey and seeing how he lived his life, like that was the summer of Gronk, and people remember, right? Like there was so many stories written, so many TV specials. I think that was the same summer he said he was going to take Tim Tebow's virginity away. Like he partied hard. He said whatever he wanted, and the Patriots couldn't say a word because you know why? Because he worked his ass off. He was productive. He was one of the most dedicated, resilient dudes in that building. And he played hard, he partied hard, he backed it up. He was exactly what the NFL needed at that time.
Yeah, and your readers will love the excerpt about Sergio Brown, who's a local kid. He's from Chicago. He's from Proviso West, played his college ball at Notre Dame, and obviously had a rivalry. I'm just going to leave that hanging as a tease because people are going to love reading that when they pick up the book, which is The Blood and Guts, How Tight Ends Save Football. Before I let you go, TD, we're in the middle of the 2022 NFL season. As we're recording this, it's the Friday of week 8. So this is not going to drop until next week. And so there's going to be more action that's played. But you and I have a lot of back and forth over the years. You covered the Packers for several years. You are still very in tune and tapped into things that go on in Green Bay. We have a lot of discussions about Aaron Rodgers. Well, Aaron Rodgers is in the middle of a very trying season up in Green Bay. His favorite receiver, Devontae Adams, is off in Las Vegas. His offense isn't working the way it was. As we're recording this, as I mentioned, the Packers are getting ready to play the Buffalo Bills on a Sunday night primetime game that could be either an exposure of how far they need to go or a bounce-back game that they sorely need. But I'm just curious in seeing this start that the Packers have been on, 3-4, a losing skid that's very unfamiliar up there, struggles from the quarterback, an inability to get anything going. Your impressions, and obviously we can banter back and forth a little bit about Aaron too, if you want.
regardless of what happened in that game that people know the result of when they're listening to this, what a colossal missed opportunity. People told me I was insane, Dan. You probably did when we talked. I don't know. But 2 years ago, even last year, the opportunity to trade a league MVP for anything you want. 3 first-rounders, 4 first-rounders, 2 seconds, 3 thirds, a package of players. What do you want? Jerry Jeudy, Patrick Surtain. Hey, what about the Raiders? Gruden would have loved Aaron Rodgers. Maybe you bring Derek Carr to Green Bay. That's Devontae Adams' best friend. Bring him aboard and take 3 first-rounders while you're at it. I don't know. Like, I think Tom Brady has always been the anomaly. He's always been in his own category. Like, mid-40s, playing like he's playing. Every other Hall of Fame quarterback it looks like Aaron Rodgers looks right now. Like, not terrible, but ordinary. He looks ordinary. He's a little off the fastball. He's not as athletic, not as mobile. He's not special, and he doesn't have a trusted go-to guy.
Yeah, no question.
Right, he doesn't have Devontae Adams.
I would still.
I just think it's a huge missed opportunity.
I would still call you crazy for that because you don't throw away 13-win seasons while you can have them. You got to remember, I'm on my 10th season on the Bears beat. They've had 1 winning season, right? And so when you're in the middle of a run of sustained success, you can't take it for granted. People in Chicago will tell you that 5,000 times over that they've been trying to recreate the 80s through the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and now the 2020s. And they failed, and they failed, and they failed, and they've never had a quarterback anything like the last 2 guys that have started in Green Bay. And so it's very risky to play that game of Russian roulette and say, let's just end our window early when you've got a chance to make a run at Super Bowls. I think the other thing that's interesting to me is this is notable for our audience right now because you seem to have a high level of belief in who Jordan Love can be. I don't know much about what Jordan Love can be, and I have my skepticism because I know how most first-round quarterbacks turn out to be, right? The odds just tell you if you're betting yes or no, you're going to win more times betting no than you are betting yes. But what? Tell our audience here what you think of Jordan Love, and if that succession plan comes into to action sooner than people anticipate, what you think of Jordan Love.
And just to your earlier point on moving on, Green Bay did it before, right? I mean, Brett Favre. I remember being there as an intern, seeing the shareholders go up to Ted Thompson with paperwork saying, sign this petition, bring Brett Favre back. Brett Favre took you within a pass of the Super Bowl, 07. And sure. Ted Thompson, say what you want about Ted, but for him to have the backbone to say, no, we drafted this quarterback, we're going to go with this quarterback. I feel like that. Yeah, there'd be pitchforks in front of your stadium. There were then, but there might be pitchforks anyways if they lose to Buffalo by 30, which I guess people know the result by now. If things continue to go south, like, fans are going to be angry anyways. So I think it's okay to just, hey, they're kind of half pregnant right now, as Rex Ryan once said. You took the quarterback, but then Aaron Rodgers kind of threw a wrench in your plans, so you're backtracking, and now, if he retires after this year, you're on the hook for $150 million. Your salary cap is shot. You could be bad for a decade anyways. I promise I'm getting your question. Jordan Love. So I think, the reason I've been banging the table so loudly to trade Aaron Rodgers the last couple of years is more so, Rodgers related more than anything in the whole package. And I get it. They bent the knee and they gave him full autonomy at the line of scrimmage, and they've given him personnel control. They let him, bring his buddy Randall Cobb, an old, slow, just about wash slot receiver who's going to take reps from a younger player. He can kind of do whatever he wants. Even listening to a Matt LaFleur press conference is kind of hilarious. He doesn't sound like a head coach. I don't think. I mean, he sounds terrified to piss off Aaron Rodgers to me. I don't think we're going to see Matt LaFleur just stand up there and sound like a head coach that could be critical of a player when it comes to the quarterback. So Aaron Rodgers has a lot of power internally, and you're right. They're all in with him till he wants to leave. And if they ever get to Jordan Love, I'm even skeptical. I don't know. I mean, who knows? I think that the numbers in the preseason aren't good, but if you actually watch Jordan Love year 1 to 2 to 3, he is a completely different quarterback. I mean, really, I guess a lot of the problems Aaron Rodgers has now Jordan Love kind of saw in the preseason, like drop passes. Like he was putting the ball on the money. He was making a ton of plays outside of the pocket, improvising, doing the kind of stuff you saw at Utah State, where it's weird, it's different. We're not used to developmental quarterbacks. Like the thing now is if you draft a quarterback in the first round, he plays year one. The Adam Breer Excel spreadsheet that gets shared, like the old school method of just developing a quarter, that's a decade, 2 decades old. So Green Bay's methodology here is different. I get it, but I feel like he has developed to a point where you could surround him with talent and win games. I mean, if Jordan Love was the quarterback of this team, I don't think it'd be that much different than what we're seeing now. You at least have a plan for the future.
I'll tell you this, the folks in Chicago are eager to see how this plays out. The folks in Chicago see the recent losing skid that the Packers are on, and they say, is this it? Is this the opportunity where the Packers' dominance over this division recedes and there's an open window, right, to go and attack? And so I think the belief is like, okay, Green Bay, you want to see how we've been living for the last 30 years? Let's see you try to operate without a Hall of Fame quarterback, right? Like, which you've had the luxury of having for 30 years now, which is insane. And so the level of curiosity, the Bears are in the middle of a rebuilding year. No one is expecting them to accomplish anything grand in 2022 and perhaps not even in 2023 or 2024. But if that window in the division opens, it changes everything in the conversation. And so the curiosity, I think there's a lot of listeners of this podcast that will hear sort of your critical nature of Aaron Rodgers and be like, hell yeah, like I'm going to go read all the Tyler stuff on golongtd.com. I'm going to follow this.
Buy the blood and guts, right?
Yeah, buy the blood and guts, how tight end save football. You're going to earn some fans with that. It's going to be interesting to see where this goes. Listen, like, yeah. I understand some of your critical thoughts on Aaron over the years, how thin-skinned he can be, how the prima donna nature is within him in his DNA and how it affects things. Like I say, I also know what it's like to cover a football team that cannot get the quarterback position right ever. And so my knee-jerk instinct is I'd rather deal with the Hall of Fame guy who's a little bit of a problem to handle at times than deal with 30 years of mediocrity where you can never get the position right. And so we'll see. Maybe the Bears get it right. Maybe the Packers recede, and maybe everything in this division is completely up for grabs 10 years from now when we're revisiting this discussion.
All right, but Dan, what did you make of Aaron's comments this week when he says a lot of people? So he was very critical of teammates with Pat McAfee, right? Like he let him have it publicly and said that Tom Clements graded him higher than any week this season. His personal quarterbacks coach back to the start of it all, which is kind of interesting. But when he then addresses the backlash to that comment by saying a lot of people in today's society just can't handle criticism.
Well,
I could not help but laugh. Like he does not. I just remember him, sitting down with an ally and local media there in Milwaukee after a certain story was written at Bleacher Report and very, very upset with some criticism. Right, he's on. Greg Jennings and Jermichael Finley were sent to the cornfield by Aaron Rodgers because they were critical. Like they're ostracized from the fan base.
No doubt, and
critical of him.
I think the word that I used a minute ago was thin-skinned, and I think that's apparent. And I think that there is certainly a lack of self-awareness at times, right? It certainly came up last year with all the COVID stuff and Aaron's consistent attempts to twist reality into something that fits what makes him the guy on center stage that has all the answers, right? And I can understand how insane that can be. I just say this, like it's a really cool discussion to have because of the point counterpoint. And I don't know that there's been a player in my 12 years covering the league that has been more fun to watch just in terms of his ability to pinpoint throws and make big plays in big moments and do some things that I've seen live that I go, holy crap, that doesn't look anything like anything I've seen with the Chicago Bears. So it's a weird kind of balancing act that you got to go through with it, right? And I know you've lived it.
Well, he's been the hot chick with the baggage that you don't care about the baggage, but what happens when you kind of lose that hotness, right?
Good analogy.
Right. I don't know if I can say that. Can I use that in 2022? Is that going to get me canceled? I don't care.
We'll see. We'll check with our producers here at Take the North. Well, Tyler, it's always a great discussion. Once again, the book is The Blood and Guts, How Tight Ends Save Football. It's your work can be found at golongtd.com. I'm a loyal subscriber. This audience, if they like the NFL and they like reading deep dives on some of the players and personalities in our league, they should get there as soon as possible and get their subscription. Thank you, brother. It's always good talking. Thank you for coming on the show.
Dan, I miss hanging out with you. We should do it beyond the combine. Let's make it happen very, very soon. And thank you so much for the opportunity here. I know you got an awesome audience to spread the word on Blood and Guts, so I appreciate it.